Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a really fascinating book.
Oh, yeah. Which one?
It's called New Scientific Concepts to Make You Smarter. The original is Inio Yuki.
Ah, okay.
And it's not your typical bestseller, the kind focused on just one big idea.
Right.
Far from it. This thing is a unique collection, a compilation of 151 scientific concepts.
Wow, 151. That's a lot.
It is. And they're drawn from insights from over 100 world-renowned scientists, scholars, thinkers, even Nobel laureates.
So a real heavy hitter collection.
Totally. It's a genuine treasure trove. And the backstory is pretty cool, too.
Oh, yeah.
It comes from John Brockman's Reality Club, started way back in '81.
Okay, I've heard of edge.org.
Exactly, that's what it evolved into.
Yeah.
The online community edge.org. The Guardian even called it the smartest website in the world.
High praise.
Definitely. And each year, edge.org asks its network of, brilliant minds, this single, really deep question.
And the book came out of one of those questions.
Spot on. The one that inspired this book was, what is your favorite, most profound, elegant, or beautiful scientific explanation?
That's a great question.
Isn't it? So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack three particularly insightful concepts from this huge collection.
Okay.
And these aren't just, academic ideas locked away in a lab. They feel like actual tools that can genuinely help you think smarter.
Yeah, see the world a bit differently, perhaps.
Exactly. A new lens.
What's really exciting, I think, is just how broad these concepts are. You said 151. They must cover a lot of ground.
They really do.
Like touching on psychology, cosmology, neuroscience, economics, you name it.
Yeah, it's all in there.
But the beauty of it, and hopefully what we'll bring out, is that even though they come from different fields, each one has this practical relevance.
Right. For how you can approach problems or just understand things happening around you.
Precisely.
All right, let's get into it then. Today, we're going to explore three of these powerful concepts. Einstein's Occam's razor,
Okay.
cultural attractors, and predictive coding.
Got it. Sounds like a good mix.
Okay, let's kick things off with Einstein's Occam's razor. This one gives you a really brilliant way to think about simplicity versus complexity.
Right. It's not just about making things simple for the sake of it.
No, it's deeper. Grasping what elegance and, true simplicity really mean in different situations.
So to really get Einstein's version, maybe we should quickly touch on the original Occam's razor.
Good idea. The classic one.
Yeah, the basic principle is do not multiply entities beyond necessity.
Keep it simple, right?
Basically, yeah. If you've got, say, several theories that all make equally good predictions about something, you should go with the one that makes the fewest assumptions, the simplest one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I always think back to, early chemistry.
Uh-huh.
Remember memorizing all those rules for why elements behave certain ways, like alkali metals are super reactive, noble gases don't do much.
Yeah, tons of rules.
But then quantum mechanics came along, and physicists figured out, fundamentally, it's about the atom's outer electron shell.
The s orbital stuff.
Right. Alkali metals have one electron that's easy to lose. Noble gases have that full, stable outer shell.
So a deeper, simpler explanation?
Way simpler. Quantum mechanics explains all that chemistry with just, 5 basic principles?
Compared to dozens of empirical rules. Yeah, classic Occam's razor points straight to quantum mechanics. More elegant.
Definitely.
But then UI designer Kai Krauss adds this really crucial perspective. He builds on it.
Okay.
He quotes Einstein, who apparently said, everything should be made as simple as possible.
Right, the classic bit.
But not simpler. And that second part, that's the core of Einstein's Occam's razor.
Ah, okay. So there's a limit to simplification.
Exactly. Sometimes simplifying more actually makes things less clear, or you lose the essence.
That distinction feels really important. Krauss actually had this anecdote, didn't he, from his work back in the 70s with sound synthesizers.
Yeah, the big Moog synthesizers and stuff.
Right. He found it was incredibly hard to make genuinely simple sounds on them.
Like a basic piano note.
Yeah, exactly. That seemingly simple sound might actually need dozens of oscillators and filters working together.
Huh. So just trying to simplify that setup would
just give you a crude bad sound.
Yeah.
Not elegant simplicity at all.
Make sense? So simple itself isn't always simple.
Huh. Yeah, exactly.
If we think about it more broadly, like a straight line is the simplest path between 2 points, right?
Geometrically.
But have you ever seen a river flow in a perfectly straight line to the sea?
No, never. They always curve and branch out.
Exactly. They form these incredibly complex patterns because they're interacting with the land, the terrain.
Seems complex.
On the surface, yeah.
Yeah.
But physicists can actually describe these river networks using fractals.
Fractals, those repeating patterns.
Yeah, where a small part looks kind of like the whole thing. They can recreate that whole complex river system with surprisingly simple rules.
Whoa. Okay. So that really challenges what you think simple means in the real world.
It does.
So pulling it all together then. Einstein's Occam's razor takes make it simple, but adds that crucial but not simpler bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's not saying simplicity is bad, but that we should look for the simple underlying rules governing complex systems.
Right. Don't mistake surface complexity for a lack of underlying simplicity.
Yeah, like think about a flock of birds.
Okay.
Their formations look incredibly complex, constantly shifting,
Fluid, yeah.
but they're actually guided by just a few simple rules, like maintain a certain speed relative to your neighbors, don't collide, stuff like that.
Which brings us to that nuance in not always simpler.
Right.
Because if the birds followed only the simplest possible rules, like flying in perfect, rigid formation,
They'd be too stiff,
yeah,
unable to react.
exactly. They couldn't adapt to wind or a predator or anything unexpected. It's the combination of those simple principles plus the individual variations and interactions. That's what builds these complex, adaptable structures.
Okay, so it's the interplay.
It is. And understanding that interplay is why Einstein's Occam's razor is such a useful tool for you when you're analyzing complex stuff. Don't just cut away detail blindly.
Right. Don't mistake just making it basic for making it elegantly simple.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, that really clears it up.
Good.
So, moving on to our second concept. Cultural attractors. This one might sound a bit academic, maybe,
A little abstract, yeah.
but it's actually super helpful for understanding, cultural stuff, human behavior, and even why some things go viral online.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Where do we start?
Well, maybe we first need to touch on memes.
Richard Dawkins, the selfish gene.
Exactly. The idea of cultural genes.
Right, so memes aren't just internet pictures with captions.
No. In Dawkins' sense, it's broader. It includes things like classic stories, recipes, religious rituals.
Enduring cultural things.
Yeah, but also the more temporary stuff like fashion trends, hit songs, internet slang.
Like Qiguanzhang, the melon-eating masses.
Exactly. Or Lan shou xianggu, that funny way of saying you're sad. Emojis, too. They're all memes in this sense.
Things that spread culturally.
And Dawkins' point was that anything that can be inherited and varied, and where those variations make a difference in how well it spreads.
It can evolve, like biological evolution.
Precisely. So a catchy headline gets more clicks, spreads better. That's meme evolution.
Okay, makes sense. So memes are constantly changing, evolving.
Yeah.
So what's fascinating then is if memes are always changing, why do some cultural traditions seem so incredibly stable over centuries, even millennia?
That's a great question. If everything's always shifting.
Yeah, shouldn't culture just be constant chaos? How do we have stable traditions? This is the puzzle Dan Sperber, a Hungarian cognitive scientist, tried to solve with cultural attractors.
Okay, so attractor, that sounds like a physics or math term.
It is originally. Think of it like a stable state, a pattern things tend to fall into.
Like a pendulum.
Perfect example. No matter how you start it swinging, eventually, thanks to friction and gravity, it settles down to that one stable point, just hanging vertically.
Right. The equilibrium point.
That point is an attractor.
Yeah.
So cultural attractors are like these stable equilibrium points within a culture. They're patterns that ideas or behaviors tend to gravitate towards or revert back to over time.
I think I get the concept. Do we have an example?
A really powerful one is looking at core Confucian moral ideas in China.
Okay. Like filial piety, righteousness.
Exactly. Think about all the challenges those ideas have faced through history. Conflicts with other cultures, influence from foreign missionaries, big critiques like during the May 4th movement.
Lots of pressure to change.
Huge pressure. Yet those core concepts have shown remarkable persistence. It's like these cultural attractors kept pulling things back towards those foundational patterns.
Wow.
You can even see it in how foreign religions adapted when they came to China.
Really? How so?
Well, take the Jesuit missionaries during the Ming Dynasty. They actually adopted the clothing of Confucian scholars.
Blending in.
More than that. They acknowledged loyalty to the emperor, and they even equated the Christian god with Tianming, which is a very Confucian concept of heaven's mandate or destiny.
So they were mapping their ideas onto existing cultural structures.
Precisely. That cultural attractor was so strong that later, even when the Pope's representative issued the Nanjing Decree, telling Chinese Catholics they couldn't venerate ancestors or Confucius.
The direct conflict.
Absolutely. But it couldn't completely override those deep attractors. Eventually, the Vatican had to acknowledge Chinese cultural traditions. Fast forward to the late 20th century in Taiwan, and you had some churches holding ceremonies honoring heaven and ancestors.
That's incredible. It shows the real pull of those underlying cultural patterns.
Immense power, yeah. Subtle but strong.
That makes me wonder,
Yeah.
you know how humans can imagine basically anything? Infinite kinds of gods or spirits? So why do so many different religions across totally different cultures end up with similar concepts? Like almost always there's some version of heaven and hell.
That's a great point, and it fits the attractor idea perfectly.
Yeah.
The thinking is that the ideas that spread best often latch onto these really successful fundamental patterns.
And heaven and hell are fundamental.
Well, they map onto basic human concepts of good versus evil, consequences for actions, maybe the idea of a soul. These seem to be very powerful, widely shared concepts. They act like incredibly successful cultural attractors.
Gotcha. So successful patterns draw ideas towards them.
Exactly.
Okay, now here's where it gets really practical, especially for today. Understanding these attractors, it helps explain why some stuff just blows up online, right? Goes viral.
Absolutely. Think about a lot of those articles or posts you see shared everywhere, especially in your own social circles.
Yeah.
Are they always like deeply profound or offering brand new insights?
Often not. Sometimes they feel pretty simple, actually.
Right. Many of them take complex social issues and basically slot them into very simple pre-existing patterns. Black and white thinking, us versus them, familiar frameworks.
So they're not really changing my mind.
Often, no. They're resonating with perspectives or frameworks you already hold. They reinforce them. They fit neatly into an existing cultural attractor in your mind or your group's mind.
Huh. That makes a lot of sense.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture for you, the listener, your own cognitive frameworks, your biases, your ingrained ways of thinking, they act as cultural attractors too.
Okay.
A lot of viral content isn't trying to challenge or change you. It's designed to match those attractors to get that recognition and feeling of, yes, this confirms what I already thought.
So if I actually want to learn something new, something challenging.
You need to be vigilant. You need to consciously resist just being pulled into those comfortable, familiar patterns. Actively question if something is just reaffirming your biases or if it's genuinely offering a new perspective.
Look out for the easy agreement, maybe.
Something like that, yeah. Seek out things that make you think, I hadn't considered that, rather than just, yep, exactly.
That's really useful advice for navigating, well, everything online these days.
It's a constant challenge.
Okay, let's dive into our final core concept for today. Predictive coding.
Right.
This one sounds maybe the most science way, but it's apparently key to understanding how our own minds work. And it's also a huge deal for designing complex AI.
Yeah, the term predictive coding might not ring a bell immediately, but I promise you are using this kind of thinking constantly, every second.
Okay.
There was this funny anecdote, I think from a TV show, about some super smart student playing badminton. And he jokingly claims he calculates the shuttlecock's trajectory using physics equations, force, angle, wind resistance.
Right, like he's solving equations in his head while playing. Ridiculous.
Totally kidding, of course. Nobody plays badminton like that. But the point is, our brain is doing a calculation, just not with conscious Newtonian physics. It's predicting.
Okay, so how does it work? The book mentions neuroscientist Celsigia.
Right. She explains it really well. Our brain isn't just sitting there passively soaking up information from the outside world like a sponge.
It's more active.
Much more active. It's constantly, actively generating its own models of what's happening, what's likely to happen next. It's navigating uncertainty.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about hearing footsteps walking towards you at a steady rhythm.
Okay. Tap, tap, tap.
Your brain instantly predicts when the next tap should occur based on that rhythm.
Right, you anticipate it.
Now, what if the next step is delayed, or comes early, or sounds different?
You notice immediately. It breaks the pattern.
Exactly. That difference between your prediction and the actual sound, that prediction error, that's what your brain primarily learns from.
Ah. So it's not learning the pattern itself so much as learning the deviations from the expected pattern.
Precisely. The error signals that something changed. Maybe the person stopped or stumbled or the environment changed. That error is the new information.
Wow, okay. That flips the traditional idea on its head.
It really does, and philosopher Andy Clark expands on this. What's fascinating here is how he contrasts predictive coding with that older view.
The brain as a computer kind of view.
Yeah, the idea that the brain just takes in sensory data, crunches it like big data, and then makes a prediction.
So input, process, output.
Right. Predictive coding suggests it's almost the other way around. The brain starts by generating a rich prediction of the world based on its existing models. It sort of manufactures what it expects to sense.
So it's predicting first.
Largely, yes. Think about catching that badminton shuttlecock again. Your brain first predicts its likely landing zone based on tons of past experience.
Your intuition, maybe.
That's often what we call it. It emphasizes perception itself. We get the gist of the situation, the brain fills in the likely details based on its models, and then it constantly updates those predictions based on the actual sensory input coming in, focusing on the errors.
Okay, that feels incredibly efficient, actually.
It is, especially when you compare it to how current AI often works.
How so?
Well, think about machine learning systems. They often need massive data sets.
Yeah, like thousands, tens of thousands of pictures of cats just to reliably recognize a cat.
Exactly. They learn from huge amounts of data. But human intelligence, we rely heavily on common sense, on this ability to predict and fill in the blanks, what the source calls brain supplementing.
We can build a model from much less data.
Often, yes. Think about an expert in, say, antique pottery.
Okay.
They might be able to identify an incredibly rare piece, even if only a few dozen examples exist in the world.
Because their brain knows what to expect.
Yeah.
It predicts based on style, material, context.
Exactly. Their extensive knowledge forms a powerful predictive model, allowing them to make accurate judgments with very limited specific examples of that exact piece.
That's a huge difference from needing 10,000 cat photos.
It really is. And this raises a huge question for AI development.
Yeah.
Yann LeCun, who's the chief AI scientist at Meta, Facebook.
Yeah. Big name in AI.
He has this famous analogy. He says, if artificial intelligence is a cake,
Okay.
then predictive learning is the cake itself.
Wow. So it's the main substance.
That's his view. He goes on, what we commonly see now, like supervised learning, learning from labeled data, is the frosting. And reinforcement learning, like AlphaGo learning through trial and error, is a cherry on top.
So the fancy stuff we see is just decoration.
According to LeCun, yeah. He says, currently, we only know how to make frosting and cherries, but not the cake itself.
That really puts the challenge in perspective. We haven't cracked the core learning mechanism.
We haven't replicated that predictive, generative core of human learning yet.
So how are researchers trying to bake that cake?
Well, one big area is moving beyond just recognizing things, like cats, to getting machines to learn how to generate them, like learning to draw a cat.
Generative models, like DALL-E 2 or Midjourney.
Those are related, yeah. It involves AI systems that learn the underlying patterns well enough to create new, plausible examples. There's research, like at MIT, using these kinds of generative models to predict future actions in videos.
Predict what happens next.
Yeah, or even take a static photo and animate it into a live photo by generating reasonable motion.
I can see how that's useful for self-driving cars or drones predicting what pedestrians or other cars will do.
Huge applications there, definitely. But the bigger hope is that cracking this generative predictive learning problem could be the key to computers learning more like humans do, achieving true, flexible, strong AI.
The cake itself.
The cake itself.
Yeah.
So to sum up predictive coding, our brain isn't just learning to predict, it learns by predicting, constantly.
It's the fundamental mechanism.
Seems to be. It's key to our cognition and a major dividing line still between human intelligence and current machine intelligence. Understanding this gives you a much deeper insight into where AI is going.
And there are probably more fascinating discoveries coming as AI research and neuroscience keep influencing each other around this idea.
Absolutely. It's a really exciting frontier.
Okay, wow. We've covered 3 incredible concepts there. Einstein's Occam's razor, cultural attractors, predictive coding.
A lot to chew on.
Definitely. Which kind of brings us to some meta-level advice, actually. How do you even tackle a book like this one? New scientific concepts to make you smarter. The source called it all dry goods.
Yeah, meaning it's dense with information, right? No fluff.
Exactly. We've just unpacked 3 concepts, but there are 148 others. So how do you, the listener, actually engage with a compendium like this full of these dry goods and make sure they genuinely make you smarter?
That's a really important question because, like you said earlier, it's not a normal book where you find the one central argument.
Right. The book is the collection of arguments or concepts.
Exactly. So the reading approach needs to be a bit different if you want to really integrate these ideas and not just have a list of cool sounding terms.
Okay, so what's the strategy? The book suggests starting somewhere familiar.
Yeah, that's the first tip. Start with authors or concepts you already know something about or are at least curious about.
Why start there?
Well, you can see how these experts frame their ideas, why they chose that specific concept as elegant or profound, how they explain it. It gives you a familiar entry point, builds confidence.
Okay, that makes sense. Build on what you know.
Then the second strategy is to gradually branch out. Explore authors or concepts that pique your interest but are new to you.
Just dive in.
Well, yes, but actively. This requires a bit more effort. Look up the authors. What's their background? What's their main research area? What are their known interests or biases?
Do some homework on the source,
Exactly. That context is crucial. It helps make sure your understanding is accurate, and it helps you spot potential issues or even errors.
like the example in the source about a bad translation,
Perfect example. They mentioned quantum mechanics getting translated weirdly as quantum mechanical engineering.
which is nonsense.
Total nonsense. But if you'd done a quick background check on the author or the concept, you'd immediately know that's wrong. That active searching and verifying protects you from being misled.
So verify the dry goods, don't just accept them.
Right, especially in a collection where different experts might even have conflicting views.
Okay, that's two strategies.
Right.
Familiarity first, then active exploration with verification. What's the third crucial step?
This is maybe the most important one for actual learning. Once you've got a handle on a few concepts, you need to try articulating them yourself.
Explain them.
Yeah, in your own words, or try to reconstruct the author's logic. The source calls this adding water to the dry goods.
Making it less dry, basically, bringing it to life.
Exactly. And why is this so vital? Because just passively remembering the conclusions, the dry facts, isn't enough.
Why not?
Well, for one, as we said, experts might disagree. But more importantly, without understanding the reasoning, the why behind the concept, or having concrete examples, you won't really know when or how to apply that knowledge.
It just stays an isolated factoid.
Precisely. It's only by translating it into your own language, connecting it to things you already know, maybe linking different concepts from the book together, that you build your own unique knowledge structure. That's how these ideas become truly yours, tools you can actually use.
Right. You internalize it, you don't just memorize it.
That's the goal.
Okay, fantastic advice for tackling dense material.
Yeah.
So let's wrap this up. What does this all mean for you listening?
We took a dive into this great collection, new scientific concepts to make you smarter.
And we highlighted just 3 ideas out of 151. Quick recap. First, Einstein's Occam's razor.
Yeah, the takeaway there is simplicity is key, but don't oversimplify. Understand that complex systems often have simple underlying rules. It's about finding that elegant balance.
Right. Second, cultural attractors.
This helps you see the stable patterns in culture, understand why traditions persist, and maybe why certain simple ideas go viral, they latch on to existing attractors. Be aware of that pull.
Good point. And finally, predictive coding.
The idea that our brain learns by constantly predicting and updating based on errors, not just by passively receiving info. Super important for understanding ourselves and the future of AI.
Absolutely.
And really, we've barely scratched the surface today. Less than, what, 1/50th of the book?
Not even. So we definitely encourage you to check out the book if this sparked your interest. Explore the other 148 concepts. Build that mental toolkit.
There's so much more in there.
And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with. How can you take these ideas we talked about today, understanding elegant simplicity, recognizing cultural gravity, appreciating your brain's predictive power, and actually apply them?
Yeah, how can they help you solve a problem you're facing? Or just see your daily life, your work, your interactions in a slightly new, maybe smarter way?
Thinking about that.
Yeah.
Well, that's the real essence of a deep dive.